What if I told you the man they mocked, humiliated, and even poured wine on was the one holding their $800 million deal in his hands? Tonight, in a New York gala full of power and arrogance, one quiet man changed everything, and the fallout will shock you. Watch closely, because by the end of this story, nothing will ever look the same again. Welcome to Radiant Story and Tales. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you are watching from. There are nights in New York that glitter so brightly you almost forget how cruel the world can be. Nights with chandeliers shine like captured stars. The music floats soft above everyone's heads, and the air smells like money, perfume, and expectations. That was the night Daniel Brooks walked into the Crowning Plaza Hotel on Fifth Avenue, a place where power looked comfortable and arrogance moved freely. Daniel wasn't dressed like the people around him. No loud designer brand, no diamond cufflinks, no gold watch big enough to blind someone. Just a navy blue suit, clean haircut, simple shoes, and the kind of calm that made loud people uncomfortable. He didn't need flash. He didn't need to announce himself. He came to watch, and maybe he came to see the truth. The ballroom doors opened to a world of white tablecloths, gold plates, and people laughing too loudly, drinking too quickly, posing for photos like their lives depended on it. A string quartet played in the corner, but almost nobody listened. Everyone was more focused on the big screens flashing one name over and over. Skyline Innovations, the company hosting the gala. $800 million. The deal they were celebrating. Mystery investor, the person they had never met but owed everything to. Little did they know that the man they kept ignoring, the one they whispered about at the door, was the very investor behind their precious deal. But let me tell you how it really began. Before Daniel even stepped into the ballroom, a security guard had stopped him at the entrance. Not because he wasn't invited. He had the highest level VIP invitation in his pocket. But because the guard assumed he didn't belong. "Sir, deliveries are made to the back," the guard said, trying to sound polite but failing badly. Daniel had simply pulled out a black invitation card with a silver skyline printed across it. The guard's eyes widened instantly. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Please go right in." Daniel only nodded. He didn't get angry. He didn't curse. He didn't even frown. He had learned a long time ago that some people only see what they expect to see. Inside the ballroom, that same energy followed him. People moved their clutches away from him. Men in tuxedos glanced his way, then pretended he wasn't there. A woman joked her friend, "If he's a guest, I'm the Queen of England." They laughed like they were in a private comedy club. Daniel kept walking. He had been invisible before. He knew how to move through rooms where his worth was priced incorrectly. He made his way toward a marble column, where he could see everything without being the center of anything. From there, he watched the stage light up as the host grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Skyline Innovations Gala. Tonight, we celebrate a partnership that will transform New York, an $800 million deal made possible by an incredible investor who remains behind the scenes." Applause rose like a wave. People lifted their glasses, their faces full of forced excitement. Then came the people everyone turned to look at, Rebecca and Martin Langford. Rebecca, the CEO's wife, walked like she owned the entire city. Martin, the CEO, stood beside her with a proud grin that reached both ears. Their entrance was so dramatic that even the music seemed to bow. Everyone watched them, everyone except Daniel, while scrolling eyes skipped right over him. He quietly observed the couple who thought they were untouchable. Slowly, he made his way deeper into the crowd, staying quiet, never rushing. His calmness alone drew subtle irritation from people around him, because in rooms filled with shallow confidence, true confidence is a threat. But then something shifted. From across the ballroom, Rebecca noticed him. And I mean noticed, like she had been waiting for someone to look down on. Her lips curled into a smirk, and she whispered something to her husband. Martin's face twisted instantly. That was the moment the trouble began. Martin stepped off the stage with the kind of smile that only rude people carry. Charming on the surface, sharp underneath, he walked straight toward Daniel, tapping him on the arm like calling a waiter. "Excuse me, sir," Martin said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Are you supposed to be here?" Daniel lifted his eyes slowly. "I'm fine right here," he replied calmly. "Oh," Martin laughed. "The fake kind that sounds like someone performing. You're observing?" "Right." He waved at a server passing by. "Get this gentleman a towel or something. Looks like he's sweating through that bargain bin suit." The guests around him chuckled. Someone whispered, "Who let him into VIP?" Daniel stayed still. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain anything. He let their assumptions talk. Rebecca joined next, heels clicking with confidence she didn't earn. She picked up a glass of red wine from a tray and stopped in front of Daniel, like she was a judge and he was a defendant. "You know," she said sweetly, "if you needed a job tonight, you could have applied. Pretending to be a guest isn't the best strategy." Daniel didn't move. Rebecca lifted the wine slowly. "Take this to table 7. They've been waiting." When he didn't reach for it, her smile cracked. Martin took the glass from her and raised it high. "Let me fix this," he said loudly. Then, in front of 200 guests, with phones quietly recording, he poured the wine straight onto Daniel's suit. A splash, a gasp, a moment the room would never forget. Wine rolled down Daniel's collar. People snickered. Rebecca smirked. Daniel simply wiped his jaw with 2 fingers. Calm, controlled, unshaken. Then he walked out. No anger, no words, no explanation. Just silence, the kind that scares people who expect reaction. As he stepped out of the ballroom, leaving behind the laughter and cameras, he took a long breath and reached for his phone. 1 call, 1 sentence. And everything in that ballroom was about to collapse. Daniel walked through the quiet hallway of the crowning plaza like a man who had already made peace with what was coming. The ballroom door closed behind him, muffling the music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, all the noise that had tried to drown him out. Out here, the world felt cleaner, the air cooler, his thoughts sharper. He reached into his pocket and took out his phone. The screen lit up his face softly, catching the dark stain of wine on his suit. For a second, he just looked at it, at the way it glistened under the hallway lights. Anyone else might have felt embarrassed, angry, hurt, but Daniel wasn't anyone else. He pressed a number he knew by heart. A voice answered instantly, respectful and alert. "Ready for your instructions, sir." Daniel's tone didn't rise. It didn't shake. It didn't even sound annoyed. "Pull the offer. Lock every channel. Announce it immediately." "Understood." That was it. A single sentence. And the fate of an $800 million deal changed forever. He hung up and slid the phone back into his pocket, breathing out once, a controlled, steady exhale. Not relief, not satisfaction, just release. At the end of the hallway, a couple waiting for the elevator stared at him. The woman whispered, "That's the guy someone threw wine on." Her boyfriend looked Daniel up and down, eyes narrowing. "He doesn't look bothered," he said. "People don't walk like that unless there's somebody." Daniel offered them a small nod. Nothing more, nothing less. The elevator chimed, and he stepped inside. As the doors closed, the faint music inside blended with his reflection in the mirrored walls. He loosened his tie slightly. His eyes were calm, steady, almost unreadable. The way a man looks when he's been underestimated his whole life and has learned how to turn that into power. By the time he reached the lobby, word had already begun to shift through the hotel like a low tremor. Guests lingering near the bar glanced at him, whispering to each other. Some pointed at the stain on his suit. A few shook their heads and muttered insults under their breath. Others looked curious, even confused. Daniel didn't slow down. He pushed through the revolving doors and stepped outside into the crisp New York night. The city always breathed differently after dusk. Taxis rushing by, streetlights glowing in gold halos, the distant hum of music from rooftop bars. A valet rushed toward him, ready to fetch his car. Daniel lifted a hand. "I'll walk." The valet hesitated, then nodded. You could tell he had no idea who Daniel was, but something in Daniel's tone made him respect the choice. As Daniel crossed the hotel driveway, something happened behind him. The music inside the ballroom cut. Just stopped. People turned their heads. Voices rose, not in laughter, but confusion. A man near the entrance muttered to his date. Why'd the music stop? Did something happen? Inside, panic had started like a small spark. But Daniel didn't look back. He kept walking. Steady steps. Calm breath. Hands tucked into his pockets, like the night belonged to him. At the edge of the parking lot, his phone vibrated again. He locked the screen. Back in the ballroom, voices were rising. Chairs scraped against the floors. Executives scrambled for their phones. The host on stage froze mid-sentence, eyes widening at the alert blinking on his screen. But Daniel didn't hear any of that. He kept walking down the sidewalk, the smell of roasted nuts from a street cart mixing with the cold night air. His shoes clicked softly on the pavement. The glow of Times Square reflected faintly on the windows around him. He walked with the kind of peace only someone with clarity could carry, a peace that made strangers turn their heads, wondering who he was and what story lived behind his calm. Inside the ballroom he just left, the chaos bloomed. But outside, Daniel Brooks walked like a man who had decided a long time ago that he didn't need to raise his voice to change a room. He didn't need to argue. He didn't need to fight. He only needed the truth and the right moment. And that moment had finally come. While Daniel walked calmly into the New York night, the ballroom he had just left began to crack open like glass under a hammer. It started small, a tremble of confusion, a ripple of whispers, a sudden pause in the music that made people lift their heads. The quartet froze mid-note, unsure if they should keep playing or pretend they intended the silence. Then the host on stage tapped his microphone, trying to hide the panic in his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to have a brief technical. He didn't finish. A tall man in a gray suit, one of Skyline Innovation's board members, pushed through the tables with a phone, pressed his ear, face tight with fear. He whispered urgently into the host's ear. Whatever he said turned the host's face completely pale. The room shifted instantly. People sensed something was wrong long before anyone said it. That's how these corporate rooms work. Everyone pretends to be calm, but they can smell trouble like blood in the water. What's happening? A woman asked her husband. Probably nothing, he said, though his hand trembled around his champagne glass. Martin Langford, the CEO who had poured wine on Daniel, noticed the panic spreading. His fake smile dropped. What's going on? He demanded, stepping closer to the stage. The host swallowed hard and said quietly, The signing has been suspended. Martin blinked. Suspended? Suspended by who? By the partner company. Guests gasped. Someone dropped a fork. Executives scrambled for their phones like their lives depended on it. That can't be right, a man muttered. Deals don't just stop, not during the gala. But they did. Tonight they did. Rebecca hurried toward Martin, eyes sharp with confusion. What did he say? Martin snapped. He said the signing is suspended, but that makes no sense. I'm the one who approves that. No, the host said quietly. Not tonight. The order came from the top. Martin stiffened. I am the top. The host shook his head. Not in this deal. Those words hit harder than any slap. Around the room, more alerts went off. Phones dinged. People gasped. One executive stood up suddenly and shouted, All Skyline accounts just got locked. Another voice rose, frantic. Investors are pulling out. My screen is red. Everything is crashing. A woman with a pearl necklace clutched her chest. That's impossible. You don't freeze an entire company on a Saturday night. Someone near the doors tapped a friend and whispered, Look at this. A group gathered around her phone. On the screen was a video. The video, Martin tipping a glass of wine onto Daniel. Rebecca smirking. The laughter. The insult. The humiliation. The caption read, They humiliated a man they thought worked for them. Underneath it, he walked out like he owned the place. The clip spread across the room like wildfire. Hands trembled. Mouths fell open. People stared at Rebecca and Martin with a mix of shock, disgust, and morbid interest. Martin stepped closer, his voice trembling. Who posted that? A server answered softly. Everyone recorded it, sir. A second server whispered, "I said he didn't walk like staff." Rebecca's face crumpled, the gold confidence she wore earlier now cracking like cheap paint. "We need to fix this. We need to speak to whoever is in charge," she said urgently. The host lifted his tablet, showing her the final blow. On the big screens behind him, red letters flashed. Skyline Innovations contract terminated. The word terminated echoed through the hall like a slap. The room fell into dead silence. Then, the board member in the gray suit stepped up to Martin. His voice was low, angry, and exhausted. "Do you know who you offended tonight?" Martin barked. "I offended no one." The board member stepped closer, jaw clenched. "You offended the man funding this deal." Rebecca's breath caught. "Who?" she whispered, eyes wide. The answer came like a punch to the stomach. "Daniel Brooks," he said. "He owns a partner company." "All of it?" A wave of gasps rolled through the room. Not dramatic movie gasps. Real ones. The kind that come from people who suddenly realize they are in trouble far deeper than they imagined. Martin stumbled back as if someone had shoved him. Rebecca covered her mouth, whispering, "We poured wine on the investor." Someone in the back added quietly, "And you mock him in front of the whole city." Guests began stepping away from them, putting distance between themselves and the sinking ship. Some whispered, "Skyline is finished." Others said, "This is history." A few pulled out their phones to record the downfall happening live. The entire future of the company collapsed in minutes. Their legacy cracked like thin glass. And somewhere outside, walking in a glow of New York streetlights, Daniel kept moving, calm, quiet, steady, because he knew something everyone else was just learning. When you mistake dignity for weakness, when you confuse kindness for inferiority, when you disrespect the wrong person, consequences come, and they come fast. I remember that night so clearly, as if the city itself was holding its breath. New York looked different, quieter, softer, like it knew a secret was about to open a door no one was prepared for. I had just put my phone down after speaking with Evelyn, and something in her voice told me this wasn't just another shift, another evening, another family trying to make sense of pain. This was bigger. This was the moment everything tilted. Evelyn, who had spent her whole life carrying burdens too heavy for a single heart, stood in the hallway outside little Lily's room, staring through the glass panel of the clinic door. Her hands trembled as she watched her daughter sleep, and I don't think she even noticed the way her shoulders rose and fell, like she was breathing through memories no one else could see. Inside the room, Lily lay curled up under the soft yellow blanket the nurses had given her. She was tiny for her age, small enough to make you wonder how someone so fragile could fight so hard. The monitors hummed gently, steady, calm, almost peaceful. But I knew Evelyn wasn't looking at the machines. She was looking at the little girl who reminded her of everything she'd lost, and sometimes everything she prayed she hadn't lost forever. The hallway lights flickered as a nurse walked past. "You're welcome to go inside," she whispered gently. But Evelyn just shook her head. Not yet. Not this moment. She wasn't ready. She leaned against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor, hugging her knees tight. "Why does life choose some people to break so much?" she whispered, almost like she was afraid the walls would answer her. I'd seen strong people crumble, but the way Evelyn held her pain, it wasn't like she was falling apart. It was like she'd been carrying the world for so long that the world forgot she wasn't made of stone. I sat beside her. "Do you want to tell me what happened earlier today?" I asked. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then finally, her voice cracked open. She said my name. Evelyn whispered. "My daughter," she said, "Mom." She hasn't spoken properly in weeks, and today she said it. Her breath shook as though the memory itself made her heart tremble. She reached out her hand, and for a second I thought, Evelyn's voice broke. She wiped her face roughly with her sleeve. I thought maybe something changed. Maybe she felt something. Maybe she remembered something. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The silence around us felt sacred. But when I asked her who I was, Evelyn swallowed hard. She said she didn't know. She just said Mom, because it felt familiar, like a word she'd heard before but couldn't place. A tear slipped down her cheek. Do you know what it feels like for your child to forget you? To forget your voice, your face, your love? Her voice drifted into the dim hallway, mixing with the soft humming of machines. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Evelyn's hand shook violently as she pressed them to her face. And every day I keep telling myself to be strong, to be hopeful. But I don't know how long I can keep hoping for a miracle that maybe isn't coming. Before I could respond, something shifted. A small sound, soft, gentle, came from Lily's room. A whimper, a sob, a cry. Evelyn froze. Her head jerked up. Without thinking, she was on her feet, pushing open the door before I could even stand. Inside, Lily was crying in her sleep, tiny hands clutching the blanket as if trying to hold on to something slipping away inside her dreams. Evelyn rushed to her side, cupping the girl's face with trembling hands. "It's okay, baby," she whispered, voice filled with warmth and longing. "Mommy's here. I'm right here." Instantly, almost instinctively, Lily's small hand reached up and gripped her mother's fingers, tight, desperate, as though she didn't want her to ever let go. And then something unbelievable happened. Lily's eyes fluttered open, clouded, confused, yes, but also searching, looking for something she didn't yet understand. And when her gaze landed on Evelyn's face, she didn't turn away. She stared. She blinked, and her lips parted. This time, the word came out slower, softer, but filled with a meaning none of us could ignore. Mom. That one word made the room feel brighter, warmer, alive. Evelyn gasped, like the world had suddenly poured sunlight back into her chest. Tears flooded her eyes as she leaned down and wrapped her daughter in her arms. "Lily, sweet girl, I'm right here," she whispered, rocking her gently. "I'm not going anywhere. Not ever." And for the first time in weeks, Lily didn't pull away. She rested her tiny head against her mother's shoulder. She breathed in deeply. She held on. I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding in a way I hadn't expected, because what I saw in that moment wasn't medical improvement. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was connection, something deep, something human, something that made you believe that even when memories fail, love can still find its way home. For a few minutes, the world outside that room didn't exist. It was just a mother and her child, reunited in a way that felt like a miracle unfolding right in front of us. After a long while, Lily whispered again, almost too faint to hear, "Don't leave." Evelyn clutched her closer, voice trembling with hope. "I won't," she said. "I promise you I won't." I stepped back into the hallway, giving them a moment alone, and as I leaned against the wall, staring at the soft glow spilling out of the room, one thought settled deep inside me. This wasn't the end of the story. This was a turning point. The moment the universe whispered, "Hold on, light is coming." Morning in New York is different from the rest of the day. The city doesn't wake gradually. It explodes awake. Sirens, car horns, people rushing offices, deliveries rattling down streets. But that morning, the streets outside Crowning Plaza and the glittering skyscrapers nearby weren't what Daniel Brooks noticed. He was already moving forward, calm, purposeful, unshaken. Inside the now-empty ballroom, the aftermath was chaos. Richard Langford and Rebecca Langford sat in their luxury penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, barely speaking to each other. The blinds were drawn, but the sunlight forced itself into the room anyway. Headlines had already spread across every screen. Skyline Innovations deal falls apart overnight. Investor pulls $800 million. CEO humiliated. Video of gala humiliation goes viral. Every word stabbed at their pride, reminding them of the consequences they had ignored. Richard paced, shirt wrinkled, hair messy. Each call he made ended in the same terse tone. "We're out. Don't call again." He could feel the empire he'd built crumbling beneath his feet, all because of a single misjudgment, a misjudgment fueled by arrogance. Rebecca's mascara was smudged, hands shaking as she scrolled through social media, watching the video of Daniel Brooks walking calmly out of gala, wine on his suit, dignity intact. "It's over, Richard," she whispered. "I know," he replied, jaw tight. We need to talk to him." before this spirals any further. They drove through the streets of Manhattan, the city buzzing around them, oblivious to the storm they had caused. Eventually, they arrived in a quiet neighborhood far from the glittering towers and chaotic boardrooms. Daniel's home was modest but elegant, reflecting a man who understood value, without needing to flaunt it. When Daniel opened the door, he didn't glare, he didn't raise his voice. He simply stood there, calm, observing. The way of the night outside, of the chaos in the ballroom, the contracts terminated, the viral video, was nothing to him. He had already processed it, already decided how it would end. Rebecca stepped forward first, voice shaking. "Mr. Brooks, we were wrong. We treated you like nothing. Please let us make it right." Richard followed, shaky but desperate. "We've lost everything. Just give us a chance to talk." Daniel didn't invite them in. He didn't need to. He kept his tone soft, firm. "You didn't lose everything today," he said. "You lost at the moment you decided a person's word depended on your comfort, your pride, your shallow assumptions." They stayed silent, listening. The weight of reality finally pressed into their chests. "You built a world where disrespect had no cost," Daniel continued. "Now you're seeing the bill." Rebecca's voice broke. "We didn't know who you were." "That's the problem," Daniel said. "You didn't care. You judged, you mocked, you humiliated. And you did in front of everyone who followed your example." Richard swallowed hard. "Is there anything we can do?" Daniel shook his head once. "The deal is gone. The trust is gone. My door is closed." He paused, letting the words sink in. Then, with a quiet but final line, he added, "Walk carefully. The world is smaller than you think." They left with nothing. Not a single favor, not a single apology accepted. Just the heavy weight of lessons learned too late. And Daniel? He walked back inside, closing the door on their chaos but not on life. He had other things to focus on. Other deals, yes, but more importantly, other people, other projects, other moments where respect mattered more than arrogance. His life moved forward because he had chosen to move forward, not react, not retaliate with rage, but with quiet precision and unshakable calm. Weeks later, the city had already begun to forget the grandeur of the Skyline Innovations Gala. Headlines remained for a while, but Daniel's life was untouched, his peace intact. Richard and Rebecca, however, had a different reality. Their phones rang constantly with refusals. Investors pulled back permanently. And the empire they had thought invincible felt fragile, even laughable. And still, Daniel didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Watching them face the consequences of their choices was enough. It wasn't revenge. It was justice served naturally. That's the lesson of Daniel Brooks' night at the Crowning Plaza. Arrogance can make you blind. Mockery can make you foolish. And underestimating someone because of appearances can cost more than money. It can cost your legacy. The city kept moving. People went to work. Subways rattled underground, and neon signs glowed in Times Square. But somewhere in Manhattan, Daniel Brooks walked calmly, assured that respect, patience, and clarity always carry more weight than loud wealth or sharp words. The world may seem enormous and intimidating, but sometimes it takes only one quiet person to remind everyone else how small it truly is. And as for the Langfords, they remembered Daniel every day, not because of what he had done for them, but because of what they had done to him. Daniel's final lesson remained simple, reflective, and heartfelt. Treat everyone with care. Respect is not earned in a gala, a contract, or a title. It is earned every day. And when you forget that, life will remind you, sharply, quietly, inevitably. The city hummed around him. The lights sparkled. And Daniel Brooks walked forward one calm, purposeful step at a time.